I hope you don't mind, Shayna said, standing in my kitchen like she'd already claimed it. We ended our lease. The boys need more space. And this is family property now, right? She dropped her huge handbag on the counter like it was a hotel check-in desk. Marcus stood next to her, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't look at me, just gave a single nod out of agreement. More like this is happening. It had only been 2 weeks since I made the last mortgage payment. I'd saved the confirmation email in a folder called Freedom. 40 years of early mornings, extra shifts, patched up boots, skipped vacations. For decades of quiet sacrifices swept aside with one smug sentence. My hand shook slightly as I lifted my coffee mug. Not from the heat, from the sting of it all. This isn't family property, I said, slow and clear. This house is mine. Marcus finally spoke, using that voice he'd adopted over the years, calm, measured, like it was supposed to soothe, but only ever tighten something in my chest. You always said it was for the family, for dinners, I said, setting the mug down, for birthdays, for visits, not for moving in without asking. Shayna rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, don't be so dramatic. We're not strangers, we're family, and this place is huge. 2 extra bedrooms, big yard. You're not exactly using all of it, like I was just taking up space. We'll stay upstairs, she said. The boys need their own rooms. You'll barely know we're here. I let out a small, dry laugh. I notice when someone moves into my home without permission. Marcus stepped in again. We figured you'd be happy. You've always been generous. A word that used to mean something kind. Now it just meant you owe us. I looked at both of them, standing there like they were doing me a favor, like I should be thankful. And in that moment, I felt like a guest in the very house I built with my own 2 hands. That night, after they left, I sat alone at the dining table, the same one where I'd served holiday dinners, lit birthday candles, and poured coffee on quiet Sunday mornings. But now it felt different, like the whole room had shifted just enough to feel unfamiliar, like something had moved, and I hadn't agreed to it. I opened the bottom drawer of the old side cabinet and pulled out a red folder, soft around the edges from years of handling. Inside were decades of papers, receipts, letters, the deed to the house, things only I had ever touched. I didn't grow up with much. Not space, not quiet, definitely not anything I could call mine. This house wasn't just a place to live. It was a promise I made to myself when I was young that someday I'd build something no one could take away from me. Reed and I started dreaming about it back when we were crammed into a tiny duplex. We'd sketch floor plans on napkins at night. He died before we ever broke ground, but I didn't stop. I borrowed tools, asked neighbors for help, learned how to hang drywall off YouTube, and trial and error. I traded yard work for leftover bricks, built it piece by piece. Every flower bed out back I planted those. Daffodils under the window, lavender by the porch, a row of bluebells, because he once told me they reminded him of the bells at his hometown church. Even the kitchen designed it when my joints started acting up. Lower drawers, soft corners. Every part of this place holds some part of me. And still, they walked in Marcus and Shayna like they knew better. Like none of that mattered. They didn't ask. They just decided, like it was theirs for the taking. But sitting there that night, I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until then. They thought I was done, that all the fire in me had gone out. They were wrong. I took the deed out of the folder and held it under the kitchen light. My name, just mine. No co-signers, no legal tricks, nothing they could twist. 3 days after that conversation, boxes started showing up on my porch. At first, I thought they were delivered by mistake, maybe meant for a neighbor. Then I saw the handwriting. It was Shayna's. The first box felt like a slap. It sat on my porch with no warning, no knock. No message, just a bold label scrawled in thick black marker: Tommy's winter clothes. No note. No heads up. Just left there, like I was a drop-off point. Like this house had always been theirs to use. By the end of the second day, there were 6 boxes total. Old diaper boxes now packed with kitchen stuff. Clear bins full of linens. A mop propped against the doorframe like someone had staked a claim. Then I opened the sunroom and stopped cold. My love seat was gone. In its place, their oversized leather couch sat wedged into tight, already littered with crumbs. Their furniture had started arriving. Mine was disappearing. I stood there, frozen, as my home rearranged itself around me, and not once had anyone asked. Later, the back door swung open like it belonged to someone else. Marcus walked in, carrying a lamp under one arm, scrolling his phone with the other. "We figured it made sense to bring some stuff early," he said, like he was talking about dropping off groceries. He didn't even look at me. "You can use the guest room for now. That way the boys can settle in without stress." I didn't say a word, and that, I realized, was all they needed. My silence had become their permission. By that afternoon, the house wasn't mine anymore. I heard the boys running barefoot down the hallway, arguing about who got the bigger bed. Shayna was already in the kitchen, rearranging my spice rack like it was some cluttered drawer she was tidying at work. The mugs Reed and I had collected over the years, handmade, chipped just right, were shoved to the back of the cabinet to make space for plastic tumblers with superheroes on them. Not once did anyone say my name. Not as the homeowner, not as the woman who'd built this place, not even as the grandmother whose sacrifices had made their comfort possible. I overheard Shayna on the phone later, laughing softly, probably her mom. "It's a little outdated," he said, "but we'll make it ours soon. Ours. Not a guest. Not a tenant. Not a visitor. Ours." That night, long after they'd gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold. The walls looked the same, but something in the air had shifted, and so had I. I didn't cry that night. I didn't yell, didn't demand they pack up and leave. I didn't march into the rooms they'd taken over or toss their boxes out onto the lawn. Instead, I opened the drawer next to me and pulled out the red folder again, the one labeled deed and damp title, the one no one had ever asked about. I laid it on the table and flipped to the section marked transfer restrictions. Then I read it slowly, word by word. My husband's lawyer had added that clause after Reed passed. I could still hear what he told me back then, clear as day: keep this close, just in case things ever get messy. Back then, I thought he was just being cautious. Now, I realized he'd been right all along. I went to the safe in my bedroom closet, turned the dial, and opened it. Inside was a sealed envelope. The revised deed, updated 5 months after Reed died. I hadn't touched it in years. I paused before breaking the seal, not because I was nervous, but because I knew what it meant. It meant I was done pretending. Inside was exactly what I remembered: my name, just mine, full ownership, no loopholes, no next of kin clauses, no blurred lines, crystal clear, legally solid. This house had always been mine, and it was time to make that known. That night, I made 3 copies of the deed. One went back in the red folder, one I left with a notary I trusted in town, and the third I had plans for that one. But I wasn't just sending a deed. I wrote 2 letters, one for Marcus, one for Shayna. Marcus's was simple, straightforward. I told him the facts: that I had paid for this house, brick by brick, that I built it from nothing, that it was never a gift, never promised, never his to claim. Shayna's letter was even shorter. "You may have mistaken kindness for weakness. This house is not yours. It never was. I've enclosed something to make that perfectly clear." I folded both letters, slipped them in envelopes with copies of the deed, and set them on the kitchen counter. The next morning, I drove into town. I had one more stop to make, not at a law office, not at a bank, Just a quiet visit with someone who understood what betrayal felt like. The town clerk. A woman who didn't owe me a thing, but who'd seen her fair share of people thinking they could take what wasn't theirs. By the time I got back that afternoon, everything was in motion. They came over that evening with dessert, as if a little sugar could erase what they'd done. Strawberry shortcake, store-bought, still in the plastic container. Shayna set it on the table like it was some kind of peace offering. Marcus passed around the whipped cream like this was just another family dinner, like he hadn't just handed over my home like it was nothing. Shayna poured water into everyone's glass with that tight little smile she always used when she wanted to look gracious, like she was playing hostess in someone else's house. Her parents came, too, dressed neat, polished, sitting there like they were guests of honor instead of part of this quiet little ambush. The boys kicked their heels under the table, laughing loud enough to bounce off the walls. Their voices filled the house, the same house they hadn't lifted a finger to help build. And I let it play out. I let the night unfold just long enough for them to get comfortable, let the charade reach its next scene. Then I stood up. I didn't say a word. I just reached for the manila folder I'd left nearby, 12 pages, neat and ready. As I walked to the head of the table, I caught their looks, side glances, a scoff from Shayna, a quiet comment to her mother, a smile that already thought it had one. They thought I was about to give a blessing, a little speech, maybe meet them halfway. But then I opened my mouth and the room shifted. I read it clearly, slowly, line by line. This document certifies that sole legal ownership and full right of occupancy belong to Veridel me. No individual, family member, or relation may reside, store property, or claim shared ownership without written consent from the title holder. Silence, not the kind that comes from shock, but the kind that comes from realization. Shayna's fork slipped from her hand and tapped against her plate. I kept going. Any encroachment may result in civil litigation under applicable housing law. Then I looked at her. Not Marcus, not her parents, just her. You can't live here, I said. You were never invited. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Marcus just stared at his plate and exhaled. Her mother reached out to steady her hand, but she couldn't grip it. I placed the documents back in the folder, slow and steady. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm not asking for your understanding. I'm just telling you how it is. Then I picked up my plate, rinsed it off in the sink, and walked away, leaving them frozen at the table. And just when I thought that was the end of it, I stepped outside and stopped in my tracks. The night air was cool, but the second I stepped outside, my skin burned. I'd gone out expecting silence. What I found instead was destruction. The lavender I'd planted for Reed dripped straight out of the ground. The boxwoods that lined the path gone. The rose arbor snapped in half, collapsed like someone had kicked it hard and walked away. Broken ceramic pots scattered across the grass. Soil dumped out like garbage. Even the bench Reed built with his own hands, the one I hadn't sat on since the day he died, was flipped over. One leg missing. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there in the dark and let the quiet say everything I didn't. Then I turned around, went back inside, and powered on my desktop. 2 years ago, after a neighbor had their shed broken into, I installed a small security system. Nothing expensive, nothing flashy. No one ever asked about it, least of all Marcus or Shayna. I opened the folder labeled Backyard Cam and started scanning the footage from the night before. There they were, flashlights moving through the yard. Marcus's voice, clear as day. She thinks she owns everything. Laughter. Then the sound, ceramic shattering on concrete. Shayna, stomping through my bed with both feet. Let's see her serve anyone coffee now. They thought they were being clever. Thought if they broke a few things, I'd fold. That I'd feel it in the roots, and in a way, I did. Because that garden wasn't just flowers. It wasn't just pots and soil. It was where I went to breathe. It was the space I built when I needed something quiet, something mine. After loss, after long days, after everything. They knew that, and they still chose to destroy it. I saved the footage onto a USB drive. Then I made 2 copies. One would go to the sheriff, one to my lawyer, the third that one I'd hand deliver. I made a fresh pot of coffee and sat by the window, watching the wind tug at the remnants of what used to be my garden. I didn't clean it up. I left everything exactly as it was. Let them see the mess they made. Let them think I was stepping back. I wasn't. I was getting ready. The next morning, I got dressed with intention. No makeup, no jewelry, just clean clothes, a clear head, and the flash drive in my coat pocket. I drove to the sheriff's office holding the deed in one hand and everything else they thought I wouldn't fight for in the other. The deputy behind the desk raised an eyebrow when I told him what was on the USB. But once he hit play and heard the voices, heard the laughter, the pots breaking, the things they said, his expression changed. Cold, focused. He took notes without saying much. "We'll file this under criminal mischief and property destruction," he said. "There's more than enough here if you decide to press charges." I left another copy with my lawyer, and a third with the whole. I wasn't going to keep this quiet anymore. If they wanted to wreck things in the dark, then I'd bring it all out into the light. By the end of the week, I'd made 12 copies. One stayed in my safe. Another went to my digital archive. The rest I had plans for each one. I mailed one to the neighbor who always happened to overhear things from her porch, another to Myrtle, former PTA queen, and the fastest information pipeline in 3 counties. One copy quietly made its way onto Pastor Eden's desk. That Sunday, I got to church early, same as always. Sat in my usual spot, second pew from the back, left side, where the morning sun hits just right. Before the service started, I handed a sealed envelope to Deacon Hale. No explanation, just a quiet handoff. By the time Marcus and Shayna walked in, something had shifted. Shayna wore a tight sweater and an even tighter smile, but her jaw was tense. Marcus didn't even glance my way. Pastor Edens stumbled briefly during his sermon. His eyes flicked toward the envelope resting beside the pulpit. He recovered quickly, but I saw it. He knew. By the end of the service, the whispers had started. Low at first, curious, careful. On my way out, a woman stopped me, just touched my arm lightly, and whispered, "Good for you." I gave a small nod, didn't say a word. Back at home, I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and walked through the garden again, the damage still there, raw and open. I hadn't replanted anything yet. I wanted it to sit, to be seen, not out of spite, just honesty, because what they tore down I would rebuild, on my own terms, alone if I had to, but never silently again. The sun had long dipped below the treetops when the knock came, a slow, uncertain, hesitant. I was in the den, thumbing through seed catalogs with a warm mug in hand. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I knew before I reached the door who it would be. I opened it to find Shayna. No makeup, no designer bag, no sunglasses propped on her head like a crown. Just swollen eyes, red cheeks, and a thin jacket too light for the cold. She didn't speak right away. She stood there on my porch, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold something in, or maybe keep something from falling apart. When the words came, they were small, barely a whisper. "I know you probably hate me," she said, voice scratchy and raw. "But we don't have anywhere else to go." She paused, eyes flickering toward the ground. "Marcus can't find work. The boys are sleeping on a pull-out couch at my parents' place. They fight all the time. It's not safe." I said nothing. She took a shaky breath. "We shouldn't have done what we did. I know that now, but please, just a few nights, until we figure things out." I looked at her, really looked, and I saw it: exhaustion, fear, a flicker of something real. A younger version of myself flashed through my mind. overwhelmed, barely holding it together. But here's the difference: I had never tried to steal someone's home. "I'm not letting you back in," I said calmly, "but I'll wire you $800 for a motel. That's all." She blinked, stunned, not angry, just surprised. "That's it. That's more than you gave me when you walked in and declared this family property." I didn't say it with venom, just fact. Then I gently closed the screen door between us. She stood still for a moment. "Thank you," she murmured. "Really?" I didn't respond. I simply shut the door. Inside, I pulled up my banking app and sent the money. Not out of pity, not out of guilt, not as an invitation, but as closure. No strings, no returns, no contact, just distance. The porch light stayed on well past midnight, but no one knocked again. The next morning, I pulled the curtains open. The garden was still in ruin, spots overturned, wood splintered, soil crushed flat. But the sky was clear, and for the first time in a long while, so was my head. I grabbed my gloves. The first few hours weren't really about gardening. They were about taking my space back, taking my rhythm back, taking a breath, and knowing it belonged to me. The lavender was gone, the climbing roses too. For years to grow them that full and just like that. They were gone. I let myself grieve them. But the snapdragons surprised me. They looked fragile, but they weren't. Even through frost-bitten leaves, they were still trying to bloom. I saved what I could, cleared out the rest. Then I made some calls. A contractor came out the following week and installed a real fence stall, strong, locked, not to keep out strangers, to remind the people who claim to love me that boundaries matter. I changed the locks on the house, too, put in a new latch on the gate. Only one person got a new key: my neighbor across the street, the one who brings over stew every third Sunday and always returns my Tupperware. At the post office, I filed a change return, anything addressed to Marcus or Shayna, marked with a red line, and sent back without a second thought. The first envelope was thick, official-looking. I didn't even open it. The whispering in the neighborhood faded not long after. In its place, something better came. One neighbor brought warm bread. Another stopped by just to say she was proud of me. A retired couple offered to help rebuild her bed. Someone left a garden center gift card on my porch, no name. Just a little mint sprig tied with twine. Bit by bit, peace came back. Not the kind that hides in silence. Not the kind you find by shrinking down. But the kind that grows when you finally say enough and stand by it. And somewhere between mending fences and turning soil, I found her again. The woman I used to be. The one who built a home from nothing. The one who never asked for attention, but stood tall when others tried to take what was hers. It's been 6 months. No calls. No visits. No awkward glances at church because they don't go anymore. Not after everything. The silence stretched out long and thin, and I let it. Then, last week, my lawyer called. Just a heads up, he said. Marcus and Shayna filed a legal challenge. They're claiming familial rights to the property. I didn't react, just stirred my coffee, waited. They didn't attach anything, he went on. No documents, no proof, just a handwritten note. The judge tossed it in under 10 minutes. I thanked him. Hung up, no questions, no fire in my chest. That version of me, the one who needed them to understand, she's gone. The deed still bears my name, just mine. The ink hasn't faded. The signature's firm. Tucked beside it in the drawer are old notes from Reed's sketches, from when we first dreamed up this place. In his handwriting, across the corner of one page for you, always. Some mornings I sit on the porch with a chipped mug that reads, "Good fences make good neighbors." It was a gag gift once. Now it feels like gospel. The tulips came early this year, bright yellow, deep orange, and 2 soft pink ones I didn't plant. Must have come from a mixed bulb bag. They don't match, and I love that. Sometimes the wind kicks up dust from the road. I breathe it in like a memory, not with sadness, not with ache, just truth. I think about them once in a while, not because I'm angry, just because I wonder, did they ever really see me, the girl who made do with less? The wife who kept going after she lost everything, the mother who said yes over and over until one day she finally didn't. But I don't linger there. I walk the paths I laid myself. I sit by the spot where the rosemary once grew. I sip my coffee in the quiet I earned. They tried to take my home, but what they never understood, what they never could touch, was that this house, it wasn't just wood and walls. It was my life, built brick by brick, in my name.